Hi, all you cave dwellers, and welcome to the Cavern Podcast. The Cavern Club, the most famous club in the world. From the Beatles and the Stones to the Arctic Monkeys and Adele. Join us on our podcast for Cavern Conversations. Each episode we talk to a special guest with real Cavern connections. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Keats, and you are listening to Series 1, Episode 2. Now, today's guest, I first met her when she came over to Liverpool to the Cavern for our International Beatle Week Festival, the big festival we hold in Liverpool here every August. She was one of our special guests. And her story, which is fundamentally about her relationship with John Lennon, has been told many times, and often, as is the case, by people who weren't even there. So much so that she was compelled to finally tell her own story. It is her story to tell. And the result is the fantastic documentary film, The Lost Weekend, A Love Story. So from a very, very cold New York, welcome to the Cavern Podcast, the wonderful, lovely May Pang. How are you, May?
I'm fine. How are you, John? This is great.
I'm very well, and it's been far too long since we spoke. We're almost in person. I'm in a pretend Cavern studio. You're in New York. We're not in the same city, but we will be hopefully in August when you come to visit us. So
you say that August, but it feels like, oh, we just started the year. It's going to come before we know it.
I know. This is the thing, isn't it? It'll be here before we know it, and then it'll be gone. It's such a busy week. I mean, I have to say, I first met you through International Beatle Week, our Beatle Festival, and you've been the Cavern Club many, many times. Because this series, we only invite. There's criteria to this podcast, mate. This is important. People have to have a Cavern connection. So I will check and say, May, have you a Cavern connection?
Oh, of course I have a Cavern connection.
You've passed the first part of the audition. And the second one is, it's only people that we really like. So May Pang, May, it's lovely to see you.
That's great.
We need to get into this. Talking of Liverpool, because I'm in Liverpool. Our office and our fake Cavern background here is in Matthew Street. When did you first come to Liverpool? Was it for one of our festivals, or was it before that? Can you remember?
I think I came to visit, but I wasn't invited yet because people still didn't realize I was a real person that was associated with John. I came about for a visit in 1985, I think, and I was sitting with Sam Leach, his sister-in-law Vera Brown, and her husband Gordon. So I have a picture somewhere. So I had met Sam Leach in Florida. There was a Florida convention in Miami about 1983 or 84.
Sam Leach was one of the early Beatle promoters, for anyone who's not familiar with Sam. Lovely guy.
Yeah. So that's when it was. And I think in 85, I decided to come up for a visit to, because Vera said, oh, come visit Liverpool. I have to tell you, it is, and I say this all the time to all my friends, Liverpool is one of my favorite cities in the whole world. And I love coming there, and I love visiting the people, and I have a great time. I mean, I really thought about, what if I had a place there? That's how close I wanted to be there.
Okay, the big question which you get asked all the time, and I do apologise because it's what, but you can't not ask these questions. I think with this story of yours, as a 22-year-old, when Yoko suggested that you should be with John and you should be with John as a 22-year-old. Now we've already established that you've got confidence but you were still, by your own admission, you were a young girl.
I didn't want it. No. That was the whole thing. I said to her, it's like you and me right now, we're sitting and it's a table and she's telling me this, and I'm looking at, when she first said to me, John and I are not getting along. Like in your office, you would know something's always going on, but you don't say anything because, you're trying to stay out of it, right? And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear." And I'm thinking, "Oh, why is she telling me this? We all know it. It's so uncomfortable. There's so much tension in the house office. It was just really, everybody felt it." And I remember her saying this, and I'm thinking, and then she goes, "Oh, he's going to start seeing other people." And I'm thinking, "Oh, now what? We got more people involved in this lifestyle." And then all of a sudden, as she's saying this to me, and she's going, "Oh, by the way, I know you don't have a boyfriend." And I just went, "What? I don't want him. Don't look at me. I'm not interested." And she goes, "I know, but you'd be good for him." And I'm going, "No, I wouldn't. No, 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 no." And then this went on for a little bit. She goes, "Oh, I think you should, and you will." And she gets up and she walks out the door. And I'm going, "What just happened?" I literally started crying because I had no idea what just took place. She came in to tell me that they're not getting along, but now she wants me to be in the middle of this thing, and I don't want it. And I told her that, and she walks out. I mean, I later asked John, I said, "What happened on your side of, when we finally got together?" I said, "Now you have to tell me what happened." And she said he was sleeping, he was waking up, and she comes in and she goes, "I fixed it for you." And she goes, "What did you fix?" And he goes, "So you can go out with May." And he just went, "What the hell are you talking about?" She goes, "You need to go out. Why don't you just go out with May?" And she goes, "How do you know I even like her?" He goes, "Oh, I know. I know you do." And that's all. And now he wouldn't come out of his room. I didn't want to come out of my office. And we're like two people going, "What just happened?" So the two of us were really, unbeknownst, that we were both really in shock about what just happened.
You were just pawns in a game, weren't you? I mean, that's total.
Yeah,
total control.
and people think John had no idea. He had no idea that this was going to be done. He's like, he was so embarrassed he wouldn't come out of his room for a few days. Actually, he didn't want to come out.
The important thing is in all of this that you did go with John, and it did turn into something genuine, and that really does come across. It comes across when I've spoken to you, but in terms of the film, it does come across as it developed into something special, and he's quoted as saying in so many times how happy he was with you in that period. I mean, once you became a couple, I mean, I presume it just became, this is normal. We're now a couple, and we're getting on with things. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is true. I mean, I said to him, the reason I did certain work, like I worked with him on the albums, was because that's what I did when I was working for them. And he didn't like a lot of people being around him. He wasn't that one where he says, "Oh, get me this, get me." So when we would be in the studio, he wanted to be sure it was only just me working with him in the studio and not some of the other people, because they didn't understand the music. And he used to enjoy it. We just used to banter all the time about who we listened to and all that stuff. So I did know that we had a good working relationship. Beyond that, I wasn't going to, I had no idea.
In terms of a working relationship, let's be honest, when Yoko first came on the scene with the Beatles, and Yoko would be sitting in the studio, and John's, quoted as saying, "Well, it was just normal, we did everything together. She was just sat there." But there was so much resentment at times towards Yoko being around. And I don't know if that's, when you were in that situation and you're there and you're working and you are, producing, you're organizing it, was the same vibe there, or were you just
Not at all.
You were just one of the guys?
I was just one of the guys. I had more, the musicians used to come up to me and go, "May, tell me where I could get this." I was one of the guys. I was not like, "Oh, why is she here?" I never got that feeling from any of the musicians. None of the musicians. They would all come to me, and I remember one guy, even years ago. Like, for instance, he used to manage the Elephant's Memory. Now that's a hard group to manage, and they would tell him, to get any answers, you got to go to so and so. And he said, I knew better. I used to go to May. She gives me the right answer. I don't need to go to somebody else. So they all trusted me because I would get the work done and I knew where to go. And that's really what it came down to. It wasn't about anything else but to get the work done.
I've done a little bit of research. I've obviously watched your documentary, so we will be talking about that. I really enjoyed that. We're going to get into that in a minute. But I was interested how you got the first job with Alan Klein's company, because you came to London early on as part of that connection with John and Yoko, I believe.
Right. Well, in 1969, boy, does that sound like a long time ago, with a 19 and not a 2000 in front. I just decided to go for a job. I mean, nowadays it would be impossible, but back then it was like, I'm just going to go look for a job. I don't want to go to school. I felt like, school wasn't doing me anything. I enjoyed music, and music was not really a thing. So I went up and asked for a job, and they needed people to work at the Alan Klein office. And, they had just acquired Apple. They just moved into this building. And I thought, okay. And when I first asked for the job, the person sitting in front said, no, we have nothing. But at that moment, and I always say, angels are watching over me. And just at that very moment, both doors on either side of the receptionist's desk open, and all these people are filing out, coming into, and this woman goes, this girl's looking for a job. And this guy turns around and says, come back after lunch. I might have something.
Unbelievable.
What were the chances? I mean, if I had waited 30 seconds, if I'd left 30 seconds before, I would have missed this.
Yeah, it's the sliding doors moment.
Yeah. So I said, okay, here I am. And the other thing was, when I got there, we must not forget, there was one other band that Alan Klein managed at the time, the Rolling Stones. So I had both of those bands. They were in high gear. I mean, they were doing, they were getting ready for their concert, a disastrous one. The one that they were on was the one with the Altamont scenario, where the Hells Angels. But that office was hopping.
So how?
And I was in the.
So you're I'm just gonna say you're 19, 20 at this point. Very 18. Okay, very, very brave just to turn up, and you obviously you knew it was you knew it was Alan Klein, and you knew who the clients were, and you knew that if you're going to go into the business, you're going you were going right to the top there. You must have had a lot of confidence and. We'd say balls, but I'm not going to say you'd have loads of balls, but you know what I mean? To do that.
Oh, I do. But you know what it is? I thought about it, and the thought was, what did I have to lose? If they said no, we have nothing, which originally she said no. And I said, okay. I didn't lose anything. I was right where I was, at the bottom. Until something happened.
Isn't it right that you did a very, very Liverpudlian thing, a very Liverpool thing, where we would say you blagged it, and didn't they ask you if you could type or something? You said, "Oh, of course I can type." And could you type Maypang at that point?
No, I couldn't type. Couldn't do a lot of things because I took academic courses and not secretarial courses, and so. I would go home and I said, well, I knew where the keys were. I would come in early. When they said, I didn't realize the office started at 10. And I would come in too early. So I had to wait till somebody get in to unlock the door. I would get to the desk and I would look at everything and I'm saying, okay. And I would start practicing before anybody would get in. And, I didn't want that to be the reason for them to fire me, that I couldn't type. So I was busy working. You want to do what you got to do. What you got to do.
I totally agree with you. That's the only way to get on. Okay, yeah. So you're in the deep end. You're doing well. You're typing away. You've nailed that. And it's not long really before you started doing some work for. Was it Yoko initially, or was it John and Yoko initially?
What it was is that. So you can get a feel for this. I'm going to give you a little thing that nobody realized and hadn't really picked up on it. I was there starting in September of 1969. Okay, just so you know a little back history. 2 weeks later, I'm relieving the girl that's at the front desk for 15 minutes so she can go do her thing. I'm getting phone calls at the switchboard, and they said, "Oh, we're from whatever, DJ from whatever in Detroit." And I said, "Yes." They said, "We just heard that Paul McCartney is dead." And I went, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Never heard of such a thing." So I call into the office and said, "Hang on. I'm trying to get somebody else in the other departments to answer this call." They said, "No, you deal with it." And I said, "Me?" So I'm on the phone with this person. They said, "Can we tape you?" And I said, "I don't know about taping me." But they called, and they always said, there's always articles. They said, "We spoke to somebody at Apple." It actually was me.
Right, I get you. And what a position to be put in when you're not.
So that was my first thing that ever happened to me there. And then in 1970, a few months later, Ringo was the first person to come in. Badfinger, Jackie Lomax all come in. George Harrison comes in with his tapes that, he's doing All Things Must Pass. He comes in, and shortly thereafter, it's John and Yoko.
Right. Okay. I mean, this is. It's fair to say you landed yourself a pretty decent job.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, the pay was okay, but at the time for secretary.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did it was a film projects you did with Yoko, wasn't it? Initially, that's what.
Well, it was both of them. Well, it was considered for both, but it was actually her idea. It was two films one was called Fly and the other one was called Up Your Legs Forever. And so they were trying to shoot it, get it done, edit, and then show it at the Avant-Garde Film Festival, all in a matter of like 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, that's the way they were working in those days, wasn't it? They were very. I mean, their creativity. I mean, you're obviously at that point they were with all the different causes, and they writing a song in one day, getting it out, and turning these things around. I mean, for you as in a first job, watching that creative process.
I was fascinated because to me, I was sitting at home, going to school, hated it. A Catholic school, mind you. I saw nothing but nuns for so long. I thought maybe I should become a nun. I mean, that was one of those thoughts because they drill you into this thing.
I was an altar boy for the Catholic Church as well, but I never considered being a priest.
Oh well. You know who went to my church?
Go on.
And mind you, nobody else in the family was Catholic. It just happened that was the best school. This actor named James Cagney.
Oh, really? Really?
And when he died, that's where he went for his services. It was at that church. He did not want the big church. He wanted a place where he really liked it, that he was an altar boy, and that was the church. I had no idea.
That's crazy.
It was amazing.
That's crazy. James Cagney.
Yeah, so all these little things that I find out now or happen to me, it's I always say the angels are watching over.
I've got to say, I watched the documentary, which I really, really did enjoy. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. And there was a lot of what I thought was there was a lot of clips from previous interviews you'd done in the 80. Looked like you very much looked like it was the 80s chat shows.
Yes, it was.
There's a lot of interviews you did there, and you brought the book out. It was I've got it written down. 1983.
83.
Yeah, Loving John was the original title. Why did you feel? I think I know the answer, but why did you feel the need to do this documentary? Which, for anyone who doesn't know, it's called The Lost Weekend: A Love Story. Why did you feel the need to do it?
Because over the years, first off, my books are out of print. So now that people want to go back to read it, they can't find it, or it's too expensive to buy when they can find it. So, and now we're at a stage, and I said, well, why not? Let me just go for it, because people have been asking me, a lot of Beatle podcasters and, really heavy duty like yourselves, that know everything about the Beatles, they eat, sleep, and breathe it. But they keep saying to me, he goes, you need to come back out because our fans, the newer set, and some of the people that didn't get a chance to get your book, they don't have a clue. And a lot of people really believe the line. We have this, the lost weekend, and I've seen where fans have actually said, "What is she talking about? What could she say? She only spent a weekend with John." So they had no idea what my history was about. So, and this is now at a time where it's a visual more than people reading books. It's because it's done. We're at that stage of the game of life where everybody is. It's what they can see, and I said it's time to do something, and people, the producers, directors, thought the same, and this is an independently made film. We had to raise the money, and so it's not like it's a studio made thing. So that we had more of it's really coming from me. I mean, I had people offering saying, "We'll give you money to help you make the film, but we want to say in it." And the producers in this really held true to me. I said I didn't want to see the movie being made on every step of the way. I don't want to be that micromanaging as it was. It's very easy to fall into that. I said, if you need me for something and you're stuck, then let me know.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
then we'll do it.
You obviously met the right people and people that you felt you could trust. And I think in that sort of when you're so close to the story, I think you probably did the right thing. I was going to say as well. I think that's very interesting what you say about the newer Beatle fans that are coming, because isn't that the strength of the Beatles, that here we are so many years after they formed, after they split, and we've recently had a new single came out, #1, and they are almost bigger now than they ever were as the Beatles, and the next generation discovering them. So these stories, they need to be told. You're absolutely correct. Need to be told in a way that they can access and understand these stories, and otherwise, it was. I felt, mate, it was your story to tell. Everyone tells everybody.
Everyone tells a different one. I mean, even when I've told the story, I've put it out in print. They still come back. They read it, and the story's different. So I said, you know what? I've got to be the one to do this movie. It's got to be coming from me. They did a great job. And obviously, if there was anything that was not correct, they would come to me and I would say, or I had any objections, they would change. And basically, it was almost zero, except for some photos of my relatives that I said, I think you got that wrong. That's not my sister, that. But it was on that level. So I pulled out everything I could get my hands on. From my own, archives, and there was so much stuff. And the reason that also, photos that I've taken of John back then, these were my home pictures, my photographs. So they became the basis for, this movie.
That's one of the main things I picked up on the movie. Your photography features so many unseen pictures and so many just real pictures of you and John, and of you both being happy, of John looking very, very happy. That's one of the things I've taken away from this. But the photography in there, and I mean, we can go off on tangents all over the place, because within the documentary, within your time with John, you did take 2 of the most important photos ever, which is incredible. I'll let you tell me the pictures, but the Disney and the photo of John and Paul. I mean, these are really important pictures that you just happened to take on your home camera, your own thing.
I know. I mean, it was like I just remembered, especially the one from Disney World. Here were the dissolution of the Beatles contract. I just remember all these papers coming in, a stack, because it's not just a piece of paper that says, oh, we end our relationship. They had so many assets. So, you're talking about all the publishing, all the film, all the, even the furniture, down to whatever it was. And, John started signing and he's going, come on, take some photos. And I'm going, do I really have to? And people would always say, don't you realize it was like this historic a moment? And I'm thinking, no, because it to me was like whatever was happening. It was whatever life was happening. Julian was in another part of the room, so I wanted to be sure everybody was still happy. Lawyers are sitting here. I'm dealing with this. So I just took the camera and it was dark. I didn't even have a light, to sort of make it brighter. So I was manually doing this whole thing. Didn't even know what I had till many years later. I'm going, what is this?
Well, that's
am I negative?
That's hindsight, isn't it? Hindsight's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
If you'd have known, it would have been all lit and staged, and it's great that it wasn't. I mean, just the context there. The other three Beatles had already signed the contract to end the Beatles, and you say in the documentary about how the stars didn't align for John to sign them when he wanted to, and they came when you were in Disneyland.
Disney World.
Disney World. They came over there.
And then think of it, the picture that I did catch, which again I always say about I'm being watched. You actually see John signing mid-signature. It's his hand with the pen writing. So it's not like he had finished it and it's just his signature. It's his hand writing it.
No, it's incredible. And I mean, we'll go back a little bit in a minute, but the other picture I was saying about the in that same period, which is when Paul and Linda turned up again. It was in LA, I think it was, wasn't it?
That was in LA. That was in 1974 March. The end of March, and they came by. I think it was March 29th. Everything's like at the end of every month, and they happened to show up the night before at our first session for Harry Nilsson's Pussycats album, and we're listening to playback, and the door opens, and I'm facing the door, and I see Paul and Linda, and it's like, oh, it's Paul and Linda, and John's reading my lips. And he's going, Paul and Linda. And he turns and he goes, hey, and that was it. It wasn't like, hey, what's going on? No fanfare. It was like they just saw each other, and I hate to use the pun. Like yesterday, they just saw each other, and it's they came and he goes, oh, what's going on? He goes, listen to playback. Hang on, and we're doing this, and then they're hanging around, and of course we do the jam, and someone put it out as a bootleg. Yeah. And then I love when the fans go, oh, it's terrible sound. It wasn't meant for public consumption, as I would say.
Yeah, then they complained, oh, the quality was terrible. But that was, I think Paul was on drums on that one as well. Oh, and Stevie Wonder.
We lost 3 drummers that night. What happened was after the session, John takes his sessions very seriously. So here he's got this group. And it's very hard to control because, you got Harry Nilsson, who's like the leader who likes to go out of his mind. And John's trying to be serious. So we get the first track down, which is the first track of the night was Subterranean Homesick Blues. Right?
Okay.
So that was the first track recorded. And so the 3 drummers, Ringo, Keith Moon, and Jim Kellner. They go home. They're gone. They don't even want to stay. They leave. So by the time Paul and some other musicians, and by the time Paul and Linda walk in, half the crew's gone. So now everybody's scrambling. So they go, we're going to jam. We'll just do some jam. And Paul just gets up behind the drums. And apparently it was Ringo's drum set that he got behind, and Ringo was a bit upset because the next day he found his snare drum broken.
Oh, really? That's fantastic, isn't it? But
he didn't like it for years, and he still talks about it, and it still stings.
Oh, I bet it does. But that's incredible. They not seen each other? John and Paul not seen each other since the split at that point. Was that the first time?
That was the first time.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? And
that's at least about 5 years at that point.
3, 4 years. Yeah, would have been.
They had to be because we saw George in 70. I remember seeing George in 71. I don't know when Paul, but it had to be at least 3, 3 to 4, maybe 5. I just don't know, but it's been a while. That was them.
But isn't that a typical male thing? It's a very Liverpudlian thing where, you haven't seen someone for years and there's maybe been a little bit of animosity, a few arguments to say the least, and then they hook up and go, Yeah, you're all right. Yeah. Do you want a drink? Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's such a male thing to do. It's let's go back a little bit to the beginning of the Lost Weekend. The 18 or so months that you and John were together. In the film, you say that it's a myth that it was Yoko's idea to send John to LA. That he actually he wanted to go to. It was his decision. You say
it was his decision. What actually happened was we were in the kitchen. It was we were standing in the kitchen. He was with his lawyer going over some legal stuff, normal. And he turns to him and he says, "Harold, when are you going back?" Because he actually lived in LA. So he goes, "When are you going back?" He goes, "I'm on a flight tonight." He goes, "Oh." And he goes, "We're going with you." Now, the lawyer had did not know that the two of us were even anything. It was like, he just looked, he goes, "Oh." He goes, "May, we're going to LA. Go make the reservations. What flight are you on?" And that was how it went.
Okay.
We just left. So nobody knew where we were for a few days.
Away from that, the picture that was snapped of you of you two as a couple, which I think was the occasion where that's where the public got to know. It was in the papers that John Lennon, was in
Time magazine.
Yeah, Time magazine. How did you feel about that? Was there any part of relief, or were you okay with it? How did you feel?
It was a bit of both. Because I tried to stay in the background. I never tried, because people would say, that's why getting photos of me and John together sometimes was difficult, except for working. Because I always said, there's only one, there's one star in the family. We don't need two stars, because that becomes too complicated. So I always used to try to melt in the background. So when he did that, I was in shock. And I knew, and a lot of people didn't know, but Yoko used to call us all the time. I mean, 5-10 phone calls a day.
I was going to ask
you
you about
that. She saw that in the paper, and I said, "Oh, this is going to happen." And he goes, "I'll deal with it." And he did. It happened. And she tried to blame it. I could see how she was maneuvering. She's, "Oh, I know it wasn't your fault, John. It definitely was May. She wanted it." So it was constantly trying to turn him, and he wasn't having it. He was actually always sticking up for me.
How did that feel? Because you do say that she was on the phone constantly to John, and to you both, presumably, or yeah.
Well, it's to me first, because she knew I would pick up the phone, and then to him. I mean, it was crazy. But here's the thing. If you don't hand the phone over, as a lot of my girlfriends would say, I would have just slammed the phone down. I said, then what? He's speaking to her. If she gets a hold of him, then what happens? She hung up on me, and I was kind enough to, all I'm doing is calling. So you can't. So I tried to stay out of it by saying, here's the phone. I don't want any of the nonsense that goes with it, Yeah. So if she calls, I would just say, it's Yoko. And I mean, there were times he goes, "I don't want to talk." And he can hang up. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And then she would call up and say, "Why did you hand the phone to him?" I said, "What do you mean?" "He was in such a bad mood." I said,
You couldn't win. You couldn't win.
Because she wanted to make the blame on me no matter where it was going, because he was defending me in every which way. So when she said, you handed the phone to him and he was in such a bad mood, I said, "No, he wasn't." And he wasn't. He was in a great mood. So when I heard him slam the phone, I was quite surprised.
I said about John, there was quite a lot in the documentary that, I mean, I've learned a lot from it, and just the lovely bits, the lovely, the normal stuff about, you say in it about, you realise that when John had toured with the Beatles, they only saw the back of a limo, the backstage, on a plane. They never actually got to do anything. I mean, anywhere they went, they couldn't do that. So when you were together in LA, I loved the bit where you saying about you went to Vegas because you just wanted to just go to normal. Well, not is Vegas normal America, but but just go and have some fun, and then there was the cowboy when he ended up being kitted out in all his cowboy gear. I don't forget where that was, but this is all normal stuff that you were able to do.
Yeah, we were having fun. I'll tell you what it was. It's cowboys. You get on a commuter plane. It's like London to Liverpool or whatever. And we get on and everybody's dressed in their cowboy outfits. And I'm like, what is this? I've never seen anything like it. And we get on this plane and everybody's heading to Vegas. I had never seen anything where you get off the plane and there's a slot machine greeting you. And I was like, oh, I like slot machines.
Right, okay,
And it was like, oh my God. So I was having a great time. But we had never gone there. We were staying at the Caesar's Palace. That was the first time when we went there. Tony King and Michael Hazelwood. And if anybody doesn't know, Tony King used to work at Apple at the time. He was on holiday there, and he was staying with his friend Michael Hazelwood, who was a singer-songwriter, not a sort of singer. But he was more of a songwriter. He wrote "The Air That I Breathe," "It Never Rains in Southern California," so he had a few hits on him, and they met us there, and we drove back with them back to LA. And Tony King rented this big, huge, like a Thunderbird convertible, and it was really like the American dream car, riding on like a Route 66 type of thing, coming back on it, and that's where we stopped in Calico Ghost Town. So we were doing all the Americana things.
But isn't that great? I mean, not only for John to do that, but presume you'd never done these things before either. Had you been out before this adventure began? This career. Had you been out of New York at all? Much?
Oh yeah, I've been out. I went to LA maybe once or twice, but not like the way I saw LA with him. No. And I've never been to Las Vegas. We wanted to go to places. We wanted to go to Hawaii, but we couldn't because remember, a lot of people don't realize he still had his immigration problem.
Yeah.
And even though Hawaii is part of the United States, it's traveling over international waters.
Yeah.
And they could arrest him at any time and throw him out while you're over international waters.
Yeah.
So we had to stay within the 48 contiguous states.
Well, there's enough. There's enough to choose from, isn't there?
It's so true. I've seen it now because I'm doing my photo exhibition in the States. I've traveled last year in 6 months. I did 24 cities, and I was like, I'm tired.
I know you've been busy because I follow you and we keep in touch. But you've been everywhere. And that's I mean, is that photography exhibition? Is it gonna continue to tour? Is it still on tour?
Here we are next week, and now that the holiday's over, I continue again, and we're booking different places, and I start in New Orleans. Now, obviously, that holds a special spot in my heart because 49 years ago, January, Paul and Linda came by to visit us at our apartment in the city, and they were saying, "Oh, we're going down to New Orleans to do a new album." And John says, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, we're going to go down there," which, of course, subsequently was the Venus and Mars album. So after they left, I could see the mind turning on John going, New Orleans, that'd be great. Love it. Love to go. That's all he would say. He goes, "Oh, you would love it too." And I said, okay. Not thinking. A couple of days later, he says, and he's twiddling around with his guitar, playing on it. And in our apartment, our bed was also our couch, our settee also. So he's sitting on there playing, and I'm sitting on the floor doing work. My back to him, and he goes, "May, I got to ask you a question." I said, "What?" And, and I'm still working. And he goes, what do you think if I wrote with Paul again? And I stopped, and it was like The Exorcist. The head spun around. I said, "I think it'd be so great." And he goes, "Well, why?" I said, you two solo are really good songwriters, singer-songwriters. But when the two of you get together, it's an you can't be beat. The team can't be beat. He said, "Yeah, you're right." And he does that. And I knew that was a time that he really would go, okay, maybe I could write with Paul. This is after the signing of the breakup of the Beatles. So now they were free to do this. So we were wanting to go down to New Orleans. And of course, it never happened because obviously his last words to me were at the end of the month, and it was like February 1st. And he goes, "We're going to go down to New Orleans, make the plans when I come back." And he was visiting Yoko because she had a great method to help him quit smoking. So I said, okay, but he never came back, and those plans were squashed. So that's what it was. So years later, let's move it forward. I'm married. This is like 1989, and I see Paul and Linda, and I said, and I'm married to Tony Visconti, and I said to I think I am, or somewhere around that time period, and I said, I told Linda, I said, we were about to come down to New Orleans, and she said, and I never got a chance to tell you, but John and I really thought about it. It would have been great. And she says, "Why don't you tell Paul?" I said, No, you could tell Paul. And she said, No, I want you to tell Paul. I said, no, and I'm arguing with her. And she dragged me and she brought me over to Paul. She has something to tell you. And as I told him, I said, we were planning on coming down to New Orleans. And Paul, being Paul, he said, sure. What proof did I have that what we were going to do was real? For years later, So I told him, he goes, "Oh, thank you for telling me." Okay. Didn't say anything. A year later, it's like 1990, I think it was, when he came to New York to do his Buddy Holly party in New York for the first time. I get a call. And they said, "Oh, Paul and Linda would like for you to come to the party." I said, "When is it?" They said, "Tonight." I said, "Well, okay." So we go down. And I see them coming through the door. Place is packed. And they see it. They see me and Tony. And he comes over to us as he makes his way through the crowd. And he says, "Linda, did you tell them?" Because how can I tell them with you? Trying to break through the crowd. And I said, "Tell me what?" They go, "Well, you know how Derek Taylor is. He always has cards. He's always selling his stuff." He goes, got one of his postcards. And it was one that John had sent him that said, "Thinking of visiting the Max in New Orleans."
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, a needle in a haystack. That's all I'm going to say. That's it. The angels were watching over again.
Isn't that amazing? So Paul and Linda, but knew that you were intended to go there, and what could have been if they'd have written again together.
What could have is exactly it.
There's an interview. I think it's featured in the documentary as well, with John saying about his, as the $1 million question, will the Beatles ever get back together? And he had started, he was open to all those collaborations, and
that was all during my time. Absolutely, yeah. I wanted him to be with his brothers.
Yeah,
and I needed him to mend fences.
Well,
there were a lot of fences.
Well, that brings me perfectly to one of the other main themes, not only in the documentary, but in which I'm aware of, but it really hit home I think in the documentary about your part in really getting John and Julian back together, and your relationship and friendship, which I know lasted forever, with Cynthia. That really comes across that you were instrumental in. And was it the trip to Disney? Was that the first time that Julian?
We did go to Disney the first time, but to Disneyland out in California.
Yeah,
he came right after in '73. It was the first time. It was so hard because Cynthia was bringing Julian over, and I remember him him saying, I wish Cynthia wasn't coming, because he had not seen Cynthia for all those years. So they had not had closure. You got to think about this. No closure. So I said to him, in my young, youthful way of saying something to him, since John and I were 10 years difference in age. I said, you don't have a right. And he looked at me. I said, you haven't been there for Julian. So Cynthia has all the right to bring him here. Until you show something, that's it.
Presumably, he there must have been a part of him that was actually scared of facing it with Cynthia. That because it's well documented what happened and that whole series of events. That's he's being forced to face up to it, isn't he?
And I was putting that right in his path. Mm-hmm. But I turned around. I also said to him, "You won't walk this alone. I will help you out."
Well, you did.
So he felt a little bit better. They got off the plane. I mean, he was pacing like a cat. It's like going in circles, and he's smoking away. God, to think you could smoke back then. And he's smoking away. And you know who else was waiting for their I think his son? It was Chad Stewart.
Okay.
Chad and Jeremy.
Oh, okay. As in Chad and Jeremy. Okay, yeah.
He was waiting, and he was at the airport, and the two of them started, talking. So could you imagine? So I'm sitting there going, this is too insane. But when the door opened and he could see Julian, I mean, Julian just leapt into his arms. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And John, being polite, we picked him up in this limo and we took him to the hotel, and it was just all bright lights, and Julian hadn't seen all this. It was great. It was good. And so I managed to, the first few days, until John said, can I have time alone with Julian? Could we just do things alone with him without Cynthia always being there? Which was right, because the first few days I had her to acclimate her into the situation.
Yeah.
And now it was time for him to have some time with Julian alone.
Which was quite right. I mean, in any situation, he's got to feel, everybody's got to feel comfortable. What I thought was lovely in the film, there's for anyone who hasn't watched the film, there's a definite style of the piece, and with the use of the photography, you're voicing over, it's right the way through, you're telling your own story, there's archive footage, there's a lightness of touch right the way through to this point. I feel, there's not overly bitterness towards what happened in Yoko and that control. It was told as a real love story. And then you get to that point where John does go back, or as, Yoko's allowed me to go home, which I just thought was just awful. Just that allowed him. But then you switch to modern day, where we are now in New York, and the whole style of the documentary changes, and it's just you talking to the camera, and Julian. It's you and Julian in that last section, which I think is absolutely beautiful, and it tells you everything, but without. Was that a conscious decision to do? It obviously was, because the style's different, but creatively and dramatically, theatrically, it really works and pulls focus.
I credit that to the team, especially Richard Kaufman, who really was the main director and producer to this. Because he cuts trailers. That's what he did for a living. He does for a living, and so he saw. Because I said I was always concerned. I didn't want the end. And I didn't want the John's passing. I didn't want to see another one of those. Here we are,
No.
And it had to be different. And I said, I don't know how we're going to get over it. And he said he had an idea, and he did it. And I thought it was brilliant, because we did not have to see that whole thing again.
No.
We know what happened. Let's just move on and see how we can convey it without going through that horrible scene. I don't need to see. I didn't need to see the guy who did it.
No.
I didn't need to see all that again.
No.
So it made it. So that was really my concern, and they took care of that.
Well, I have to say, hats off to you all, because it's really, it's such a contrast to how the film's jogging along, and then we get to that. It's really and I'd already been thinking about like the Julian connection right the way through, and Cynthia, and I thought that's lovely because I know that you were friends with her right through till we lost Cynthia.
Yeah.
Lovely lady. Amazing.
I was so heartbroken because I had seen her about a year and a half before at her home, consoling her for the passing of her husband.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh my God, I dreaded that phone call.
And not, what a hard life Cynthia did have. I mean, I know she was happy, towards the end with her last husband. I know that, but and another thing I was going to say about with Cynthia, but I was going to say the same to you. Life after John, that Cynthia's had her story of life after John, and your life after being in the eye of a hurricane and all these cliches. We've spoken about
still difficult.
We've spoken about it, and it's your friend Tony King, and it's in the documentary. And I've highlighted it here. This is a quote from Tony, who said, "Her whole life was turned around as a result of this experience," and from talking to you and from watching the film and knowing everything, that pretty much sums it up. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I took every day as it came. I did everything. It was at the moment. It wasn't like, it wasn't premeditated for anything. So, I mean, you wake up in the morning and then all of a sudden you get a knock on the door and it's David Bowie at the bottom of the steps or those are things that happen on a daily basis. Mick Jagger was one of our constant visitors every time he was in New York, and they sit on the bed and they start talking all sorts of stuff, like little boys. I gave him his, I let him have his time with his friends, and, I would walk out of the room. John used to say, "I like the way you handle everybody," because I didn't want to be, he needs his, boy time, with all his friends. I don't need to be in the middle of everything. Yeah. And that's how I always felt, that he needed other outside people he grew up with, people that he made friends with, new friends, old friends, whatever it was. And didn't have to be just me and him. We were already 24/7 as it was.
Yeah.
I didn't need to make every little bit, that tiny bit. So to me, having Julian, he got every weekend, we would make sure he called Julian. From that moment that I gave John and Cynthia closure, he had no more fear about speaking to Cynthia. So whenever he would call and get Cynthia, "Oh, hi, Sim, what's going on? Oh, who are you seeing?" Oh, and she would tell what was happening. And she would, "Oh, send him my love." He was a totally different person, a person back to Liverpool, seeing his friends, all that stuff started, and you could tell.
Yeah. Well, you've got
I was happy.
Well, you've got to face up to things, haven't you? Otherwise, you don't get the closure. You can't move on. And he certainly got that. I was reading something. I didn't know this one either. So John goes back to Yoko, and you have to get on with your rest of your life, which you do. You've got two lovely children. What was it? Your son that was living in Bolton? Was it Bolton? Yeah,
he went to Bolton.
Yeah, I remember you saying. I think when we last met, I've got to go over to Bolton. Anyone who's listening thinking, "Where's Bolton?" It's not far from Blackburn, Lancashire, as in the day in the life.
It's right. It's like 15 minutes by, I think, the train or whatever, 10 minutes, right outside of Manchester.
Yeah.
It's really just right outside of Manchester. So it's kind of funny. So I was coming over quite often, seeing my friends in Liverpool, go to Bolton, just go home.
It's just the most obscure. Is he still in Bolton?
No,
he's
God, no. He's come back to the States. He's living in the Midwest. He loves the cold.
Really?
Don't ask me what happened. But he loves the cold.
Well, what happened is he lived in the UK and he got used to it. That's what happened.
He loves the Midwest, and he lives in Minneapolis area. And it's I went to see him finally. He goes, "It's the first what was it? First relative, real close, the mother, comes out to say, okay, let me see your flat. And I remember walking in and said, my God, it's so neat. How come you weren't this neat when you were home? Yeah. He just started to laugh.
They never are. They never are.
So he enjoys himself. And my daughter's doing very well. She just got married,
yeah,
actually.
I saw that. Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. That's fantastic news.
And she...
So she in New York? Is she in New York?
Oh, she is in New York. She's a design director for this company called Nest, N-E-S-T. And they make these gorgeous candles and fragrances, and they're worldwide. I think they were talking about being in big department stores. Here they have them in Saks Fifth Avenue. They were all these high-end places, Sephora. And I think they're talking about the different places in England at the moment as well.
We'll look out for that. There was one thing I didn't know about you bumping into Yoko accidentally in Reykjavik, which I didn't know because it was October the 9th because it was to do with the Peace Tower. Presumably.
No, it hadn't happened yet.
Oh,
this was the first trip, very first trip. And it was involving the songwriting contest.
Okay.
They had a song, right? And so I happened to be going with Iceland Air to Liverpool, with guests. I was the guest there, and people could talk to me. But because it was Iceland Air, you had to stop in Reykjavik, which I loved. I said, perfect. Another city I love to Reykjavik, Iceland. All right. Get off the plane and get checked in. And the person who organized it said, Yoko's in this hotel. And I went, oh, okay. Haven't seen her in years. So I wrote her a note. And I just said, hi, it's May. I happen to be in the same hotel. Wishing you luck, whatever it may be. And I'm staying here. Just passed on, heard nothing. And so the next morning, we were on a plane to leave for Liverpool, to actually go to Manchester, then Liverpool. And I remember going into the restaurant and tons of press, tons of, everybody from both sides, the party, that the people on our plane and the people that were, with her, walked in, and there was this table, and I took my girlfriend with me. There's this table with all the food. We get all the food, sitting down. And I'm sitting opposite of my girlfriend, and it's like a banquet, to all straight across. And she sits, and I'm facing her, and she goes, oh God, she just asked me. I said, who just asked you? What are you talking about? And she goes, she just asked me what I should have for breakfast. I said, who? She goes, Yoko. And I said, oh. So I turned over and I looked, and I see her, and I said, well, I took a deep breath, and I said, I guess I better get up and say something. Okay. And I did. I walked over, and you could hear a pin drop in that restaurant.
Oh, I can imagine.
All of a sudden, it just went quiet. 2 rooms, and it went dead quiet. So I just remember I went, Yoko, and I'm Yoko. I go, Yoko. She goes, Yoko.
No.
I mean, by the 3rd time she had to look up. There was no other place to look. You've done this, right? Yeah. So she looks up and she goes, I said, hi, it's May. And she goes, and I said, I just wanted to come over and say hello and wish you well on your project. She goes, thank you. Mind you, she had a woman holding her food on one side of her, and she had an assistant on the other, like with her arms stretched out, like thinking I may jump over the table or something. And I'm like, and I said, okay, that was it. Said, thank you. I turned around, I walked back, and I sat down. I said, I did my bit, right? Sat down to start to eat, and I see out of the corner of my eye, I see Yoko wandering again. She's wandering around the tables, and I said, okay. I said to myself, she's looking for me. And sure enough, she stood off to the side, and she starts doing this. And I'm going. And I start looking over my shoulder to be sure. There's nobody else. I knew it was for me. And I went, my girlfriend says, who are you waving to? I said, Yoko, under my breath. I wouldn't get up again.
No.
I said, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was like, hi, how are you? She's mouthing this whole thing.
Why the sudden?
Because the first time didn't look so hot.
Yeah.
I would say take two. She was very distant and I was just being friendly. And
but
now it was.
It's interesting, isn't it, that she felt the need to turn on the PR and turn it all around, and it's
with all the press sitting there, she had to do something.
Yeah. Oh well, it all comes that she did her best Paul McCartney and put her PR head on and said, "That's the one." Listen, you know what? I could talk to you for hours, but I did say to you we'd be chatting for about an hour. You know what I love about this conversation? We started talking about Liverpool. Liverpool's been throughout this episode, this chat. You know, in this last conversation, you were on the way to Liverpool via Reykjavik. A random meeting with Yoko. I love that. I just can't wait to welcome you back for our International Beatle Week Festival in August, mate. It's going to be great. We're going to show the documentary, and we're going to do a Q&A or an interview. I might even try and do that myself, and we can have another chat, and we'll do that for all the Beatle fans in August.
Absolutely, I look forward to it. We'll talk about the schedule. There is a possibility.
Go on.
Don't know yet.
Go on.
I might maybe bringing over a couple of. Maybe the exhibition might come over at the same time.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that. We'll because I was thinking when I said to you before, is it carrying on tour? I thought if it would be great if we could have an element of the photographs and that exhibition.
Scott, my partner in this, has been checking things out.
As they say in showbiz circles, May, you get your people to talk to my people. In that case, my people is me. It's only me. But we'll talk about that. Hopefully, it would be enough to have you here anyway. But the fact that we're finally going to get to show all our International Beatle Week fans who haven't seen it yet, your documentary will be great. We'll have a chat. We'll have a couple of drinks at the bar. You'll meet up with all your old friends. Frida Kelly, former Beatles fan club secretary. I was speaking to Frida yesterday. She's in good health. She said she spoke to you the other day. I'm so glad. Yeah, no, she's doing really well. She's wonderful. So you two lunatics will be reunited in August. And we look forward to it. Okay, so before we do wrap up, May, and say goodbye, we're asking all of our guests on Series 1 of the Cavern Podcast to choose 3 songs by a Liverpool artist. They have 3 favourite songs by Liverpool. This is so we're going to compile a Cavern Podcast playlist for Spotify. So we have asked you in advance, and have you made your choice?
Well, yes. It's very hard because there was so many that I really loved. And, obviously Jerry and the Pacemakers, Don't Let the Sun Catch You Crying. That
is in straight out. I mean, I'm not the judge and jury on this, but that is my favourite Jerry and the Pacemakers song. And Jerry wrote that. That's one that Jerry, what a beautiful song. What a beautiful.
It is a gorgeous song. The second one, and it was a toss-up between 2 people. One was Billy J. Kramer, and Bad to Me, but of course, which is written by the Beatles.
Yeah.
But the other one was I was on the road in the Midwest, and I hear Freddie and the Dreamers.
Okay, there's a bit. Carry on. There might be a bit of controversy here, but carry on.
The song that I heard, I'm Telling You Now. I think it was
Telling You Now. He had the funny dance as well.
Yes, and that was the other one that was in my head. And then then the third person for me was Cilla Black.
Okay. Cilla's
You're My World.
That's a great song. So you're definitely going with Cilla Black, You're My World. And number 2, you'd like to go with Freddie and the Dreamers, I'm Telling You Now. Well,
because that's so nobody picks them, and it's like in the Midwest. I was laughing. I said, of all the places to hear this song, and so so that's the second one. Well, now I'm going to pick something out.
I need to pause. I need to put the judge's hat on here, May. I'll do.
Okay.
Now, Number 2, Freddie and the Dreamers. I'm telling you now, young lady, you can't have that.
Oh.
Because they are from Manchester. They're not from
Okay,
Liverpool.
then we'll move them to the side.
They're gone.
Then we'll move them.
Are we going back to Billy J with Bad to Me?
Then we'll go to Billy J and we'll do Bad to Me.
May, thank you very much. What's the weather like over there? Is it full? You've got snow?
Not me, not in the city. That was the difference. Where I lived, where I used to live upstate, I would have had a foot. I've had 0.2.
Oh, well, that's
and
good.
it's all gone.
That's good.
And it rained, and we had a huge rainstorm yesterday. That's it.
Good
for us.
Well, if it's cold, wrap up well and bring the sunshine with you in August. We'll see you then, May. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Cavern Podcast. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Can't wait.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cavern Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we can't do this without you, the audience. So please like, share, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, get involved on our socials and tell us your Cavern stories. See you next time on the Cavern Podcast.